and welcome to Money Matters TV and in our segment called Growth Stories, where we hear from entrepreneurs and advisors sharing their secrets and advice on what business owners need to know to grow. Our host, Mike Verrill, Vice President of the Sharp Financial Group, unfortunately couldn't be with us today for today's episode. However, I'm super excited for the opportunity to host the show along with one fantastic guest. I think you'll really enjoy today's discussion. As a reminder, my name is Katie Wenger. I'm a transaction and advisory associate at CBRE. We're a global real estate consulting firm, and I specialize in providing high-growth companies in the Philadelphia region with real estate strategies to navigate their business objectives. I also serve on the advising committee and a member of the PA Alliance for Capital and Technologies, and I'm the regional leader of the CBRE Women's Network in the greater Philadelphia region. As always, please note from time to time financial issues relating to life sciences, healthcare, or technology matters or companies may be discussed on the show. These discussions are not and should not be viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since this program is pre-recorded and shown at a later date, please keep in mind that the information may no longer be current. You should always check with your financial advisor before entering into any type of financial transaction. As I mentioned, we have one fantastic guest today in the public relations sector. I'm looking forward to exploring more about her growth mindset, how she's navigated so many different changes throughout her career, and now she's truly an icon of helping business leaders, businesses, and organizations gain the attention and really the all of the awareness that they need through radio, blogs, television, newspapers, magazines, and more. Before I introduce her, I want to remind you how you can enter a question here on Money Matters TV. We didn't have
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
So with a strong financial understanding and a drive to live the Wall Street dream, our guest, Debbie, has learned to seize opportunities when they arise and to make the best out of those opportunities. We're pleased to welcome Debbie Goetz to Growth Stories this week. She's the owner and president of Debbie Goetz Media Connections, and we're honored to have her as a guest and hear more about her story. So welcome, Debbie.
Thanks so much, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure if anybody has ever called me an icon before, so thank you for that.
Today's your day.
Yeah.
It's true. And, Debbie, before we get started, I'd love to just give everybody a brief overview of who you are and what your company does. So if you wouldn't mind starting there, that'd be fantastic.
Sure, Katie. So my firm provides a variety of communication services such as public relations, media relations, crisis communication, social media, content curation, blog writing, you name it. Any way that a company or an organization communicates, we help them do it more effectively, more concisely, more on message or on brand. And we work with small to mid-sized businesses, especially B2B service providers. We work with municipalities and a wide range of nonprofits. And we work to help them amplify or augment their message and mission on whichever platforms they use, and also in particular with members of the media so that they can reach their target audiences.
Fantastic. Thanks for that overview. You really do it all, especially in a really important time where, communication and how we're presenting ourselves to, the world is ever relevant. So I appreciate you giving us that overview. So as you know, in Growth Stories, we love to kind of start with, where did you grow up? It's that from our previous conversations, you really learned to seize the opportunity at a young age. And I'd love to share with our audience a little bit of background of how you grew up and kind of what influences were in your childhood.
So my childhood was pretty unremarkable. I grew up in the suburbs of Long Island, where we biked and walked everywhere. and the mall was the biggest hangout for teenagers. I started working probably around age 13 as a babysitter and a mother's helper. And during college summers, I worked for an attorney whose daughter I had babysat for years past. I didn't have help finding jobs. I always had to find them for myself. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a research pathologist. So they were not particularly networked, in the business community. So I had to be a self starter in that respect.
That's amazing. And you had mentioned, there was a financial interest. You kind of got a bug when you were growing up and kind of in those college years. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So my dad and his family were very active in the stock market, my uncles, my grandparents, and I would watch my dad read the Wall Street Journal every day and check the markets. And I think for me as a kid, maybe it was a way to be close to my dad. But I became very interested in it, and my parents signed me up for a summer enrichment class when I was about 13, and it really interested me. So I kind of had that in mind for when I went to college. Not everybody knows what they want to major in, but I said, I'm going to be a finance major and I'm going to be a stockbroker. So I majored in finance, I minored in Spanish. I took some French classes, and my dream was to become a stockbroker.
That's amazing. So a lot different from what kind of your previous intro, right, of what you're doing today. So can you talk us through a little bit of the journey, from that stockbroker dream to kind of really forging the path to your own communications company? It'd be awesome to hear a little bit more about your journey to where you are today.
My squashed stockbroker dream. So when I graduated from college, all bright eyed and ready to take on Wall Street, the starting salaries were not enough to live on. And I had to kind of go in a different direction. And through a friend from college, I found a job working with a startup dental manufacturing company. And they were very small, and each of us that worked there had to do every job from taking phone calls to packing orders, traveling all over the place to trade shows. And I traveled all over, especially where Spanish and French speaking dentists were in attendance. So I had to actually take the product manuals that were translated in Spanish and French and learn dental Spanish and French so I could explain the products to these guys. And from that company, I went on to work for Depository Trust Company. It's a Wall Street clearinghouse for securities, and I worked under the VP of General Services, not a very glamorous department. He managed the mailroom, fleet services, the cafeteria, and other operations. But I looked at this as an entree into the Wall Street world. And while I was there, I started grad school for my MBA at NYU, also in finance and in international business. So I think I had told you at DTC, my dream job was in their participant services department. And the participant services reps were the people who managed the accounts of the banks and brokerage companies that were clients of the depository. So that's the job I really wanted to have and tried to get in the couple of years that I was there. But then in the interim, I got married and I moved to Bucks County, and I gave them 6 months' notice because I needed to save money to transfer to Temple and finish my MBA there full time. And during that 6 months, um, is when an opportunity presented itself for me to interview for a participants services rep position. So it was a big bummer, but I was moving to Philly and it just wasn't going to work. There was no remote working in those days.
Right. I know, different world we have today, but I think at the same rate, sometimes those things happen for a reason. And as we kind of explore more of your past, I think this is one of those cases that, I'm sure whatever path it may have set you down could have been a wonderful path as well, but it might not have looked the same as where you are today. So it's one of those things, it's life for you. I always say, it
Well,
comes out of the.
yeah, and in all honesty, when I've seen over the years since then, the kind of work life and life that stockbrokers have, I'm not sure I had the constitution to be a stockbroker. But like everybody says, things happen for a reason. And once I moved to Philly and I finished my MBA, we started a family. And when my oldest was a toddler, I had the opportunity to teach a workshop through the Small Business Development Center at Temple University. I had had a graduate assistantship there while I was in the MBA program. And this program was in Bucks County, teaching individuals how to start a small business and how to write a business plan. There was a naval installation here in Warminster, and it was closing. And so they were trying to offer education to people who were not going to relocate to another naval installation. So I did that. And then I had a variety of part time jobs while my kids were growing up. But in 2006, I connected. A friend of mine kind of put a bug in my ear that I was a very well connected person. And her company, she worked for EY, and they had a concierge service where like people who worked for the company could go to that concierge service for anything they needed, a gift, travel arrangements and whatnot. And she thought I'd be really good at that. And so I connected with somebody out here in the suburbs of Philly who was doing that. And she took me on as a subcontractor to try to build her business in Bucks and Montgomery counties. So when I did that, most of the work I was doing was kind of like marketing, helping small businesses with marketing and whatnot. And I joined a couple of chambers of commerce and networking groups to meet people, to develop relationships. And, things started to evolve from there.
That's incredible. So you took this big jump and you landed in Philadelphia, and it sounds like through your network you were able to navigate some really awesome opportunities that were both really worked well for a working mom at the time, but also where you got to utilize some of your skill set that you learned, in that almost startup culture, and of course with your business education. So where kind of did the PR bug and PR kind of come into the mix? And you had mentioned some marketing, but what really set you down this path to open your own firm that focuses on, making connections?
So, while I was involved with a local chamber of commerce, a situation came up. I had met a number of, local legislators and business leaders and whatnot, and a situation came up where I live in Jamison, Bucks County, and we had a sports bar nearby. And one day they decided to not just be a sports bar, they decided to become a topless bar. And in this little sleepy bedroom community with 3 elementary schools and a bunch of churches and a couple of daycares and a gas station and a supermarket, people were very upset. And so I was asked to help get some attention on this issue. And I started reaching out to all the TV stations and newspapers and all the media outlets. There were so many more back then because this was a while ago. And there were a couple of township meetings. Then we had a town hall meeting. And um, at the end of all of this and the uproar, we drove them out of town, so to speak. And new owners came in and turned it into a wonderful family friendly sports bar, which is still here today. And I think from that, I learned about making connections and the value of developing relationships, especially with members of the media. Many of those relationships that I still have, to this day. And other situations came up in the community, like when people knew I was involved with that, they asked for help, with other things that came up. And so I started to kind of build a portfolio of successes at getting media attention for different entities and organizations.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, very much a unique situation that, again, it's not something you probably planned on or felt that you were
No.
preparing for, right? But this opportunity, arised, and you had not only the network, but also the drive to really make sure that the interests of, your grouping, the chamber, was heard loud and clear, and ultimately get to the goal that everybody shared at that time. So I think it's a really interesting topic of kind of, not necessarily planning your path here, but falling into it in some way, but also taking these opportunities and making the most out of them. So, you kind
Absolutely.
of started this wonderful brand for yourself and company. What were some of the biggest lessons? You mentioned a few, really leveraging your network and, utilizing what you could, and almost that snowball effect, it sounds like, of having a success and getting an opportunity and getting another success. So what are some other lessons you learned when you're taking your company off the ground?
Well, I forgot to mention before, so from that sports bar initiative, um, I learned what legs and eggs are because I never knew what that was. And they actually offered me the pole when they sold the business. I'm like, yeah, no, thank you, I'm good. But I thought maybe I would. I was realizing that the business model for PR was way different than what I was involved in, and that I could command a higher rate for my time. So, having a few mentors along the way was really instrumental in getting me to go out on my own because I thought I would go and work for someone else. And they're like, girl, you got it going on. So I took the plunge and I haven't looked back. But one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to know my worth and to not be afraid to ask for it. And that's an evolving thing. My worth back then and my worth today are different. And but that's an important lesson for anyone to really know and feel their worth and not be afraid to ask. It comes from experience. It comes from learning from your mistakes, and also it comes from taking on work that perhaps you shouldn't have, just because you want to keep on working. And I've learned there's no such thing as failure. We make mistakes. We need to look for the silver lining. We need to take from that experience, that negative experience, um, what's that which will help us be better or work better or do things differently in an effort to reach our goals. And that can be something you think about in your personal life or your business life. And I think you and I talked about a book by Michael Port called Book Yourself Solid. And I learned an important lesson that he teaches in that book called about having a red velvet rope policy. When you think about a red velvet rope, at a movie premiere or a popular club, that keeps out the people that are not on the list. Um, he talks about having a red velvet rope to make sure that you only take on work that inspires you or for which you will do your best work. Because what happens is in those early days, if you take on work that doesn't inspire you or that might send up a few red flags, the those people tend to, I mean, for lack of a better expression, suck the life out of you, and they bring you down, and you end up not doing your best work for them because it's just a struggle and a hassle. And then it puts you in a mind frame of not being able to do your best work for the clients that really deserve it. So having a red velvet rope policy is really important in any business.
Yeah, I love that advice. And I think, knowing your worth and having that kind of policy for yourself go hand in hand. Your time is incredibly valuable. It's one of our biggest assets we have. And of course, when you're first getting started and you're kind of scrappy and trying to figure things out, you're more willing to do that. But when you get to a point where you can kind of pick and choose what really inspires you, you're ultimately going to work harder for that project or that client and have a better outcome. And when you said earlier, that sucked the life out of you, it's more that you're just not inspired or passionate. And I think we as entrepreneurs, we are highly passionate about what we do. And when you are aligned with the mission of that client or that project, it's a lot easier to kind of tap into that passion and really make the best outcome for that project or client. So I really appreciate that advice. I think those are really great takeaways. And I think, of course, in your journey, I'm sure there were a lot of challenges, that kind of go hand in hand again with how do you even define what is right for you and what isn't, or how do you define your worth? And I'd love to hear your thoughts and how you kind of have worked through that as a business owner.
Hmm. Well, I look at what's going on around me. I educate myself. I talk to other PR professionals, in professional groups through social media, attend webinars, and it usually takes somebody yelling yelling at me, to better understand it. But I think that it's a challenge. I think it's an ongoing challenge, and I think that um, you can't be afraid to say no to certain things. Like when I first started out, I was taking every meeting, and every whatever. And a colleague of mine said, stop giving your stuff away. Like there comes a point in a meeting where people are just trying to pick your brain, and you need to say, you need to be comfortable enough and confident enough to say, that's typically something we talk about when someone has engaged my services. I'm so much better at doing that now. And because of the pandemic, I'm so much better at not meeting in person with people because it takes time to drive wherever the meeting is and have the coffee and have the lunch, drive it. You lose a lot of time. So my initial conversations tend to be phone calls and Zoom meetings. So thank you, pandemic, for that. Um, so I don't think there's a magic formula. I think it's being conscious of what's going on in your industry and talking to others and doing some research. And sometimes you just kind of, how they say you throw spaghetti up to see if it's like, um, you put it out there, and if people value, they've come to you for a reason, and if they, value you, they will pay you what you're worth.
Yeah, that's very true. I think a lot of it too is relying on your network and mentors, to kind of guide you and be that sounding board as you're trying to navigate. And I think especially in a you're not necessarily selling a product. You're selling yourself, and you're selling your network and how you process things and how you go about getting the ultimate outcome, whatever the goal of the client may be. And I think that becomes really challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs because there's not a thing, right, that you're paying for. You're paying for kind of you and your guidance. So
Right.
it
And it's
really
also very
requires,
hard to PR is hard to measure.
right.
So, I can't always quantify my value
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So, I think
or the
all
value
of
of an outcome, really. Like I can't always
right.
quantify the value of my PR outcomes.
Right. And that's, I
Sorry.
think, even harder. No, all good. I think that's even harder is how you can't quantify it. So, how does you in turn kind of put a dollar sign associated with it? And I think that a lot of times comes from the person providing the service, in this case, PR services. So, is there any kind of grand success in your career that you're incredibly proud of, and what has that taught you? Because I know a lot of times we focus on the challenges and what they teach us, but what have some of your successes taught you?
So I've learned a lot about, especially from my early experiences about, not hesitating to roll up my sleeves to get a job done. I've learned there's always ups and downs and challenges. There were no rainbows and unicorns waiting for me. I had to make my own opportunities. But I think you and I talked about this one project from the heart that I had, um, where I had done some PR for a home health care company that had clients that were, the husband was 104 and the wife was 98. And I had done some work for his 104th birthday. And, because I had made it a point to network and introduce myself and make connections with all of like local legislators and whatnot, I was able to get them to his birthday party. And then all the TV news, the TV, all the local news, TV and whatnot, all came out. And then a few years later, they came to me and said, Dad wants to meet the president. And I said, heck yeah. And if LeBron can meet the president, Michael Jordan can meet the president, and football teams meet the president, I think a 108-year-old veteran of World War II can meet the president. And so I worked my network. Um, I learned a lot about politics and about government through the process. And ultimately, with the help of Senator Casey and his team, we were able to get Bill Moore to the White House. And it was not easy. It was a nail biter for sure. But that story made international news. It was on all the nightly news stations. Lester Holt talked about it. They talked about it on CBS News, and he was interviewed by CBS News for a segment that went across to all the affiliates across the country. It was just an amazing experience to make that happen for him, and he actually passed away the following month. So that is just huge. I have that photo on my refrigerator. I have it in my office. I'm still connected with his family,
That's
and
incredible.
yeah,
And that's, I think, you worked your tail off to make it happen because you cared and you were passionate about
yes,
making this happen. And it's amazing what we can do when we are deeply passionate about something. Well, we're
yeah.
almost getting to the end of our show, Debbie, and I'd love to just share kind of what's next for you and your organization. Where do you see yourself growing in the next upcoming years?
Um, well, I pride myself on working with organizations and businesses that try to make the world better, whether it's financial literacy or the environment or animals or victim advocacy. So I would love to work with more municipalities because they always have a lot of good things going on in their communities, more nonprofits, and just keep doing what I do. And you and I talked about a book that inspires me called The Four Agreements. And the Four Agreements are be impeccable with your word, and integrity is always really important to me. And don't take anything personally. I always say you win some and you lose some, right? And so, um, you try not to take it personally. It's probably not about you, it's about their budget or about something else. Don't make assumptions and always do your best. So
I
I
love it.
really do try to do all of that. I try not to be afraid. I tell people, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, toot your own horn so people know what you're doing and what you're capable of, know your value, and that helps you build confidence for who you are and for whatever it is that you're putting out there, whether it's a product or a service.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much, Debbie, for joining
Thank
us.
you.
This was an amazing conversation, and congrats on your successes. And we're excited
Thank
to really
you.
hear more about all that's to come. So we're
Thank you.
excited for our next guest on Money Matters TV is Mickey McLaughlin from Sandtrap Advisors. And as a reminder, you can download the podcast from iTunes and Stitcher, as well as the programs on YouTube channel money-matterstv.com. Thank you so much for joining Growth Stories. We'll see you next time.